What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video on Fantasy Football Scout. And we're doing something a little bit different today. So we're not looking back at the current season, but seasons gone past and FPL legends. So this has been inspired by the article series on fantasyfootballscout.co.uk around the FPL World Cup. So go and make sure to check that out. If you haven't already, you can vote on who the best FPL players have been. But in this particular video, we're looking at FPL legends, and I'm looking at forwards, in particular the big hitting forwards. So we might do another video at some point with kind of the cheaper forwards, some of the bargains over the seasons gone past. But right now it's FPL legends, big hitters. And the way I've done this is I've looked back at some of the scores over a season-long period, and on the Dream Team scores of who's got over kind of 200 points on multiple occasions. So controversially, you won't see great strikers like Drogba or Suarez make this list, even though they'd definitely be included in some of the best Premier League strikers ever, because obviously it's all based around FPL as well. So I'm going to go through a bunch of players, talk you through their seasons, who hit high points, kind of what their goals per game and stuff like that has been, and basically just reminisce about some great strikers. So let's just jump into it. We'll start off with Thierry Henry. For a lot of people, the greatest striker to ever play in the Premier League. I won't get into that debate in this video. We'll stick to it from an FPL point of view, but obviously he has had some pretty hefty scores. So looking at kind of season totals, he had a 4-season period, so 4 seasons in a row where he scored over 200 points, and not just over 200 points, but in 2002-2003 was 271. That was only beaten once, which we'll come on to another player in a minute. 2003-2004 was 242, then 04-05 was 231, and 05-06 was 239. So I kind of remember watching him at the time and remembering how great he was, and kind of in awe of everything he could do, and obviously scored some great goals against Man United as well. But from an FPL point of view, it's kind of before my time. I've looked into this a bit further. So obviously in terms of consistency, absolutely great. To score over 200 points 4 seasons in a row is basically ridiculous. 231 points being the absolute minimum. And it's hard to say, looking at the players that I know we're going to talk about for the rest of this video, that he's not the best striker ever. From an FPL point of view. Now, he doesn't have the highest season total ever, but that kind of level of consistency for 4 seasons in a row hasn't really been done again. So really, really good. Now, if you look at kind of the stats and stuff from that, so overall career in the league, 0.68 goals per game, which is just incredible. That's kind of, there's a few players on this list with a similar ratio, but again, obviously he did it over a very long period of time. Then looking back at the kind of seasons he had, so one of the things obviously we have these days in FPL is it feels like there's more rotation. Players aren't necessarily as nailed on to play every single week because there's so many competitions and stuff that they're being saved for. But in 2002-2003, when he got 271 points, he only missed 1 game all season. I mean, what would we give these days for a player of that quality to play that many games? It just doesn't feel like it happens that often. We often talk about injuries or rotation. It just didn't really happen for Henry. And that season was 24 goals and 25 assists, which is 49 attack and returns in total. Now, potentially, from an FPL point of view, he actually had more assists because, obviously, if you get brought down for a penalty, that doesn't get counted as an actual assist, but in FPL terms it is. So we don't have that data, or at least I couldn't find it. But even so, 49 attack and returns is just absolutely ridiculous. And I think one of the things I would say about strikers these days, and obviously the landscape's kind of changed a bit, and we look more maybe for big hitting midfielders for obvious reasons like extra points for clean sheets and goals and stuff, is if you've got a striker like Henry that can score that many goals but also top it up with assists, that's where they really come into their own. And we'll talk about some other strikers that maybe struggle a bit to do that. And then looking at kind of other seasons, so 03-04, he hit the 30 goal mark, which obviously not many players have done in the Premier League. It's been done a few times at this point, but it's still quite a small list considering how many seasons we've had. And he still chipped in with 9 assists, so that's 39 attack and returns total. And again, only missed 1 of the game. And just to cover off the other season, so 04-05 was 25 goals, 14 assists, again 39 attack and returns. And he even missed 6 games that season, so imagine how good that total could have been. And then the last season, 2005-2006, 27 goals, 8 assists, 35 attack and returns, 6 games missed. So absolutely incredible. I think Obviously, there's a bunch of other strikers we're going to talk about now, and we'll come to a conclusion at the end, but it's hard to argue against Henry being the best FPL striker ever. So Robin Van Persie is definitely a striker I have great memories of owning early on when I started playing FPL. I know controversially, I've put him in a Man United shirt for this one. Obviously, he spent lots more seasons at Arsenal, but that's the beauty of making these videos. You get to choose which pictures are used. So I went for that Man United season because it was extremely good, although the season before was actually a better points total for him. So obviously, if we remember that Henry got 271 points, Van Persie had 2 seasons in a row where he hit more than 260. That's how good he was back then. So 2011, 2012 at Arsenal, 269 points. And then the following season, obviously that famous move where he came to Man United and helped them win the league. So 2012-13, 262 points. So extremely consistent, those 2 seasons in a row. So we don't have points totals for his whole Premier League career, but do have some of his biggest, like I said, those 2 seasons. So looking at those particular seasons, 11 and 12, 30 goals, 14 assists, so 44 attack and returns. So again, topping up those kind of goal scoring records with assists, which is really what we want as fantasy Premier League managers. And only 1 game all season where he didn't play 80 plus minutes. So it was a huge season, 269 points. Interestingly, the following season, the Man United one, 26 goals, 15 assists, so another 41 attack and returns, even though it was only 7 points less, and he missed more games. There was 5 in total where he didn't play more than 70 minutes. So there's a few, obviously we can't look at a huge breakdown of that because the data just isn't there, but it could be that he got more bonus points at Man United, less yellow cards, maybe he missed less penalties and stuff like that. But there must have been a good reason why he played less games, basically, or played less minutes, but came out of a slightly lower score, but it was still very, very close. So, you know, missing just 1 game over 80 minutes and then coming and missing 5, but getting a score that was pretty much the same is pretty incredible. So I actually remember owning Van Persie at the time, and then the season when he got 269 points was the same season Man United beat Arsenal 8-2, and I owned Van Persie that week, and I actually benched him. And I pretty much got away with it. Obviously, it's you know, people who watch me a lot, you know, I'm slightly biased towards Man United, but it wasn't even really Man United biased back then. It was just that the defence was doing pretty well, and I thought even though Van Persie's in incredible form, hopefully Man United can keep him out. And I did get lucky because he missed a penalty that game. He did score 1 goal, but obviously his total, because, you know, when the other team scores 8 goals, a lot of the bonus points go there. So I kind of got away with benching him. Bit risky, but I didn't really bench him outside of that. Incredible player, 2 scores over 260. Really, really good. So Luis Suarez up next. Fair to say, probably a bit of a divisive character. Won't get into that too much. Again, we'll stick to the FPL only. And looking back, I owned him at the time when he was at Liverpool, getting these huge scores that we're going to talk about. And I do wonder what he could have done from an FPL point of view if he'd stayed at Liverpool. Obviously, he went on to big things at Barcelona, but from a purely FPL point of view, he was about as essential as it came in that 2013-2014 season. So he had 2 scores over 200. So 2012-2013 was 212. Pretty good, not amazing compared to some of the scores, but the following season was 295. The best ever season total from a forward, and very close to Salah's 303, which I'll talk about a bit more in a minute. So to put into perspective how good that 295 season score was, he missed the opening 5 games through suspension, so couldn't play in any of them. He had 33 matches total, only blanked in 9 of them. So obviously the rest of the matches he got some kind of assist or goal in. 30 goals and 25 fantasy assists. That's 55 attacking returns. It's just absolutely insane. And I would argue that the 295 that Suarez scored is better than the 303 that Salah scored. Now, don't get me wrong, obviously having the record is great, and Salah himself will go down as an FPL great. He's just come in and done amazing things at Liverpool. But only scoring 8 less points as a forward, so he gets less points for goals, no points for clean sheets, missed the opening 5 games of the season as well. And I think this is the big one, and obviously we talk about penalties a lot, but Luis Suarez was not on penalties, Steven Gerrard was. So obviously he could win penalties for Gerrard and get 3 points for the assist. But you imagine his goals would have been even greater had he been on penalties and taken away from Gerrard. Now, Gerrard was such a good penalty taker, that was never going to happen. But that's huge. 55 attacking returns and no penalties. I've not seen, I don't think, a better season. And it was just ridiculous owning him at that time. You just captain him every single week. If you played a weak team, I remember the amount of times he would play like Norwich and get hat-tricks all the time. It was just such a dead cert. There was no worries about Obviously he had like any player. He did have some blanks, like he had 9 in that particular season, but most of the time you just captained him every week and didn't have to worry. And yes, we'll always talk about essential players, and a lot of people will still do that these days with Mane and Salah, but that was just absolutely ridiculous. So looking at his goals per match in the Premier League, it was 0.63, so slightly lower than the likes of Henry. But in that season, that 2013-14 season, he was up at 0.94. Absolutely ridiculous. The best season I think I've seen in FPL. So Luis Suarez will go down as a great. Obviously, only a couple of seasons where he scored more than 200, but he would have done more had he stayed at Liverpool longer. So Sergio Agero, again, another player that I'm sure will go down as one of the all-time greats in the Premier League. 3 scores over 200. Now, he hasn't got like a huge score like Van Persie we've seen score over 260 twice. Suarez has got the record. Henry's hit 231 or more for 4 seasons in a row. Agüero not quite that good in terms of pure FPL points. So 2011-12 was 211 points, 14-15 season was 216, and the 18-19 season, so most recently with a score over 200, was 201. I think if you started playing FPL kind of a similar time to me, so I started around 9-10 years ago, then Sergio Agüero is probably the forward that most comes into your mind as being consistent. Obviously, we've had Harry Kane, which we're going to talk about soon. Obviously, a couple of great seasons from Van Persie and Suarez. But Aguero's been around and super consistent. And we were just actually discussing FPL memories on Fantasy Football Scout in the comments section on Monday. And one of the first ones that came about was Sergio Agüero, his 5 goals against Newcastle. So that was back in the 2015-16 season, the famous game week 8. You would have heard about it, talked about on the Scoutcast numerous times. And interestingly, in that game, Newcastle were 1-0 up at half-time. And I can imagine what the posts on social media would have been around that time. Captain Agüero, he's done absolutely nothing. Lots of agony from Agüero captainers. And then he went and scored 5 goals in the second half. And I remember that season and that game well because Mitrovic put Newcastle 1-0 up. And I'd actually brought him in that week against Man City, not a transfer you'd usually do. And I was basically trying to be clever because that was the season that Leicester won the league. And Jamie Vardy was absolutely smashing it week in, week out. And I thought it'd be clever rather than get Jamie Vardy. I thought I'd get Mitrovic in. So I was laughing when he scored against Man City. He then went on to do very little and Jamie Vardy continued absolutely smashing it. So I remember that season well for good and bad reasons. But that 5-goal score was absolutely huge. So Agüero definitely goes down as one of the FPL greats. And I think in terms of thinking about strikers, obviously season totals are great. If you can get a player in and have a huge score over the course of a season, you don't have to worry about transferring them in and out. That's really good. But obviously Agüero doesn't have that for a couple of reasons. So one, he doesn't have the best injury record, which is why a lot of his scores, yes, they're over 200, but only just. So he doesn't have the greatest injury record. And obviously in recent years as well, there's been a bit more rotation, especially since the likes of Jesus came in. So that's one of the reasons why, 3 seasons out of 8 is he scored 200 plus, but the rest of the seasons he hasn't. But obviously, in FPL, you don't necessarily need a striker for the whole season. So if you get him in for his good spells and then get rid of him if he does pick up an injury or starts to get rotated, then that's absolutely fine. And if you look at his goals per game record, it's 0.69, which is actually slightly higher than Henry. That just shows how good Agüero has been. And he's been one of those strikers that's topped up his FPL scores with assists on occasions as well. So I think the only thing that really lets him down is just the injury record and a bit of rotation meant he's not been able to get those huge scores that the likes of kind of Henry and Van Persie have. But in terms of, knocking up FPL points over the course of a few games here or there, like, 10 games, I'm sure his kind of points per match would be incredible. So we know Agüero is great. In terms of season titles, not as great as some of the players on this list, but he'll still go down as an FPL legend. So Wayne Rooney makes it onto the list, 2009-2010, scoring 224 points. And then in an 11-12 season, 230. So both season totals higher than Agüero. And obviously he will go down as one of the all-time greats from a kind of, a Premier League striker point of view. And has been extremely consistent for a very long time. And obviously when you hear people talk about memories, one of the memories you'll hear people bring up is when he scored 32 points in a double game week. Obviously if you had him captain, 64 points. That's before you even start thinking about triple captains that are available these days that weren't at the time. So imagine that, nearly 100 points it would have been for a triple captain from Rooney in that game week. And he had lots of hauls in him, and obviously those 2 scores do get him on this list. But in terms of goals per game, it's actually quite low and much lower than other players on this list. So 0.42 goals per game in the Premier League. So if you think the likes of Agüero's 0.69 and Henry's 0.68, his goal scoring ability wasn't huge for the whole of his career, but obviously he did play a lot of games in the Premier League, whereas players like Suarez, for example, were only playing for a few seasons. So I think also one of the things that kind of overshadowed Rooney for a little bit was Cristiano Ronaldo, obviously how good he did. So it's probably not a coincidence that two of Rooney's biggest seasons came after Cristiano Ronaldo left. But still, looking at the seasons, 09-10, 224 points, 26 goals, 5 assists, 31 attack and return. So again, he probably needed a few more assists there to top that up to a really huge score. And then the 11-12 season, 27 goals, 7 assists, 34 attack and return. So extremely good there. So I think from an FPL point of view, Rooney was good for a lot of the time. A bit like Agero, if you had him at the right time, he was extremely explosive. But you wouldn't necessarily want him for a whole season outside of those two. But definitely FPL legend, 32 points in a single game week or a double game week. Incredible scoring. So last on the list is Harry Kane, and if you started playing FPL kind of recently in the last kind of 6 to 7 years, again, he's probably one of the more prominent strikers that you think of, along with Sergio Agero. 3 scores over 200 already. So the 15-16 season was 211, 16-17 was 224, and then the 17-18 season 217. So he's been extremely consistent since he burst onto the scene. Obviously, those of you that were playing back when he first burst onto the scene, he was only like 5.5 million, something like that. He got into the first team and he just absolutely smashed it straight away. There was that famous game where they played Chelsea and a lot of people benched him. And obviously we always have that psychological thing about benching cheaper players. So even though he was doing so well, lots of people benched him against Chelsea. I think he scored like 2 goals and got an assist as well. Pretty big score for the price he was. And I actually played him that week, so I was extremely happy. But obviously his price is a lot higher since, for obvious reasons. He's been very consistent. So he's probably been... I've kind of spoken about him already on a video this week. He's probably been forgotten about a little bit this season. Obviously, he's injured at the moment and was towards the kind of last few game weeks. But also because the likes of Salah, Kevin De Bruyne and Sadio Mane are doing so well. Yes, the Liverpool players are a bit more expensive. They've been so consistent, racking up huge scores. The Caine really hasn't had much of a look in, although he has still been owned by quite a few managers over the course of this season. And as you can imagine, when you're looking at a video full of the best strikers, his goals per game is incredible still. It's 0.68, so the same as Henry and just behind Agüero. So in terms of scoring goals, as we know, Harry Kane is pretty good. I think one of the reasons his top score is only 224, so he hasn't hit the heights of like Van Persie, Suarez and Henry, is yes, he's nailed on. Yes, he has penalties. Yes, he's got a great goal scoring record, but he never really tops that up with assists. So 7 is the highest amount of assists he's hit in a season. That's fantasy assists as well. So if you could get that a bit higher, we'd start seeing him get back to the kind of, or get up to the kind of 250 plus seasons. But nonetheless, he's been a great striker. And I think, as I said in the last video, I think the break that Kane is going to get now should do him good. Obviously, he's going to have to use a lot of this time to actually get over the injury in the first place. But there's been a lot of talk about him getting rushed back too early. And we'd hope that maybe the break he's going to get and then the break into kind of whenever the season might restart should help him get back to kind of where he's been before. And he's around the £11 million price mark now, so he's not up at the kind of 12 and 13 million pounds that you're kind of playing for the likes of Salah at the moment. So at some point, he could be a great option for the rest of this season. And going forward, you'd hope that you get another good price at the start of next season. And maybe, just maybe with this break, he'd get back into scoring 200 plus, being super consistent, penalties absolutely nailed on, and no reason why he can't get a score kind of close to the likes of Van Persie and co if he can top up those assists. So that is it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I got to be honest, I really enjoyed doing some of the research behind the points totals and kind of the amount of attack and returns and stuff they had over these incredible seasons. So if you did enjoy it, make sure to give it a like. Let us know in the comments below. And we'll be sure to do more. There's obviously midfielders, defenders to look at, maybe look at bargain players as well as kind of big hitters. And also in the comments below, I want to know who is the best FPL forward ever. I don't want to sit on the fence here, but obviously there are, different criteria you could do it around. Like if you had Sergio Agero when he's fully fit for any period of games, there's every chance he could outscore any of the strikers on this list. But obviously from a season-long point of view, the rotation, the injury worries means he's never going to match up to the likes of Henry, even Van Persie for those 2 seasons. Obviously that incredible season from Luis Suarez, 295 points. So let me know below who is your favourite FPL player ever, and also why. Is it because of, you know, a memory you have of them, the consistency of their points per match, or just their season totals? I'm kind of gutted that I didn't play FPL back in the days when Thierry Henry was absolutely smashing it, but obviously I got to see him play, which is almost just as good. So let me know in the comments below. Leave a like if you enjoy it. If you haven't already, head on over to fantasyfootballscout.co.uk and check out the FPL World Cup, and hopefully we'll be back for some more videos like this next week. We'll also have Football Manager, a video with David and Az, 3 PM on Saturday, so trying to fill the football void there. They're going to play out the rest of the FPL season, so make sure to check that out, and I will catch you again soon.